Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session on culture as emergency preparedness. My name is Amund Sjøli-Sveen. I'm here on behalf of Norting, the Northern Assembly, and we are first out in this session today to share with you how we work with preparedness in the North. So the name first, for you non-Norwegian speakers, Nord means north, that's easy, and ting is an old word for assembly, or parliament, those who make the laws of the land. So, Norting, Davidigi, Poyolong Karayat, Nordurting, Severnaya Duma, Arktikimi Inatsisartut, Ukyuk Taktimi Katinik. The Northern Assembly is an assembly for the North, the whole North, and nothing but the North. The Norwegian coat of arms there before the lion lost its head in the revolution. And why do we need an assembly for the North? Well, because the capital is always located far away down south, because the power is always located far away down south, and because the money usually ends up far away down south. And this is why Norting, the last 10 years, have been traveling throughout the circumpolar north. We've held assemblies in a barn in Målselv, a bus in Tromsø, and a barn in Kirkenes. We've been outdoors for 2,000 school kids, in theaters and congress halls, in a closed-down fish factory in Lofoten. We've been to North Cape on the brink of the European mainland. We have been visiting Santa Claus in Rovaniemi in Finland, where he lives. We have been to Reykjavik in Iceland and Akureyri on the north side of Iceland. We've been to Anchorage to visit the Alaska people. We've been to Longyear in Svalbard, Nuuk in Greenland, a snow castle in Yellowknife in the north of Canada, and some months ago we marched through Copenhagen, the capital of the Nordic colonial state of Denmark. And all places we visit, people vote on issues. That is the point. The first assembly voted yes to receive sponsor money from the Norwegian state-owned oil company, and then voted yes to spend it all on free vodka for the assembly. In Yukon, in Canada, the assembly voted to change the name of the city Whitehorse, which has been called Whitehorse only since the white man came around 120 years ago, and to change the name to Kwanlin, the original indigenous name. In Kalaallit Nunaat, that is Greenland, people voted for independence from Denmark. And in Kirkenes in Norway, close to the Russian border, we had an assembly with young people from both Norway and Russia. By coincidence, you can see the date, on the very morning of the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And all the students, both the Norwegian students and the Russian students, which were with us on video link, voted very strongly against the invasion and for Ukrainian freedom that morning. But we don't just do votes, we've also run for a seat in the Norwegian parliament. We've had cake, we've been parading in the south, parading in the north, we've been parading outside the UN headquarters in New York City. We have been drinking vodka, serving vodka. We have been reported to the police for serving vodka. We've been in the news, and we made our own Eurovision for the North, the Pan-Arctic Vision. This year it was held in Nuuk, Kalaallit Nunaat. Next year we'll hopefully be going live from Iqaluit in Nunavut, Canada. And we have updated statues. Hans Egede was a priest born in Harstad in the north of Norway. 300 years ago, he traveled to Nuuk on behalf of the Danish-Norwegian king and started the colonization of Kalaallit Nunaat. There is a statue of him in Nuuk, but also in Norway, people are celebrating his memory.
For noen dager siden sto vi i Harstad ved en statue av Hans Egede, han med tilnavnet Grønlandsapostel. Han var den første kristne misjonær til Grønland, eller Kalaallit Nunaat, som folk der selv kaller landet sitt. Han har lenge blitt feiret som en helt, oppdager og sivilisator i Norge og i Danmark, til tross for at han var helt sentral i koloniseringen av grønlenderne, både kulturelt og økonomisk. Nå står vi foran kirka i Vågan i Lofoten, der Egede var prest i noen år. Også her står en statue. Også her finnes det gater som bærer hans navn. I Kabelvåg finnes det faktisk både en gate og et torg oppkalt etter Hans Egede. Denne statuen foran Lofotkatedralen ble satt opp så sent som i 2018, da kirka her valgte å feire mannen som for 300 år siden dro ut for å frelse et arktisk folk og overtale dem til å tro på den samme guden som han selv. For å kunne frelse folket der han kom, måtte Hans Egede selvfølgelig motarbeide og forby viktige kulturelle og spirituelle uttrykk som trommedans og maskedans. Derfor har grønlenderne selv sluttet å feire misjonæren, men her i Vågan feires han fortsatt. Kalaallit Nunaat feirer sin egen nasjonaldag denne uka. I respekt for folket der så merker vi både statuen og gata som er kjent som Hans Egedes gate, med informasjon om misjonæren og kolonisatoren, sånn at folk som kommer hit kan få med seg hele historien.
Yes, and later we also went to the capital, Oslo, to install a sign on the statue there too, and at the same time we updated the history knowledge of the local police officers. And now we are here at this Arctic frontiers, and it's always interesting when that is pointed out to us. This is a frontier. And you know, of course, that frontier is an American concept from the time of the Wild West, back when men were men and Indians were savages. The frontier is the zone between civilization, which is behind you, and the wilderness, or the land of the indigenous people, as it is also called, which is in front of you. And the frontier is a space up for grabs, a tabula rasa for explorers and investors. So for the inhabitants of the frontier, it has always been important to be prepared. And we are here to prepare our minds today, but we also need to prepare our bodies. And you are lucky, because we have with us dancer and choreographer Eva Svaneblom. She is your physical coach of today. Eva.
Thank you, Armand. I'll just move this to the side a bit.
Yes.
Okay, so today we are giving you a toolkit to be prepared at this frontier, prepared to raise your voice, prepared to stand up for your beliefs, prepared to fight back. And let's get into our bodies a bit, and let's start from there. So if you all stand up. I'm going to teach you a few moves, and we're going to put these moves together, and we're going to do them to music. It's not as scary as it sounds. So we're going to start with a move that's maybe a classic sign of resistance. We're going to pump our fist up into the air. And we're going to do that 4 times. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Amazing. And then after that, we're going to hook arms with our neighbors. Create a human chain. Together we are strong, you know? And we're going to sway a bit from side to side, side to side. And then after that, we go back to the fist. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to hug our neighbor on the one side. Hug our neighbor on the other side. Ooh, there was double microphone. And if there's no neighbor, you just hug an imaginary one. And then we have the fist again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do that from the top again, and then it's just a few things at the end again. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. And sway, sway, sway,
Yes.
sway. And 1, 2, 3, 4. And hug. And hug.
Yum.
And fist. 1, 2, 3, 4. And after this, there's a little freestyle moment. So to be prepared...
First the flag.
The
flag.
flag.
Yeah.
Oh my, how can I forget about the flag? Thank you, Armand. So now I want you to grab hold of the biggest flag you can possibly fit in your imaginary waving here. And we're going to wave this flag from side to side. This is a flag that shows who you are and your beliefs. And while you wave this flag, you're going to be really proud. You are here, you're showing up, you're doing the work.
Yes.
Yes, we have 4 waves. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now, comes that little freestyle moment. To express yourself is also a kind of preparedness. And words might not always be enough, or sometimes words are too dangerous, and we have to use our bodies to express ourselves. So just, do you for a few counts in this music, whatever you feel like. And then there's going to be, in the music, you're going to hear like, this is the end. Then you take a pose. Perfect example. Yeah, it can be strong, it can be soft. Just be there in that pose. It starts with a fist. We're just going to do it. You're brave people.
We're ready?
Let's do it, yes.
Okay, so on my count then, you're ready. Count to 4. Okay, let's see. Here comes. There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Kan du beherske deg sånn som meg? Da du nordlending du, og da skal du bare tro. Du aldri mer alene hvor du for vi har isbjørner I enga, og vi kjøper med penger. Ja, vi en sabla gjeng. Hei!
Amazing. Great job.
Amazing,
Gonna
amazing.
put this back.
Ja, bare sett den her på siden, jeg tror. Det var
Should I
litt
just keep it there?
Ja, ja, ja.
Yeah, just keep it there.
Amazing. Very good. Takk, Eva. Eva is also born and raised on a different frontier in Tornedalen on the border between Sweden and Finland. Now, I would have told you about the song, you that don't know it, but it takes too long time. We don't have that time. If culture is important for preparedness at this frontier, then what culture are we talking about? Whose culture are we talking about? The Norwegian state did for many years run a whole industry of shipping proper culture from the capital to the north to make sure the northerners developed into well-behaved citizens. And that story is no different from in Canada or Greenland. So preparedness in the north has always meant to be prepared to fight back threats of cultural extinction, not just from the enemy outside, but from the capital within. To say that culture is fundamental for preparedness is to say that the voices of people living here matter. It is to say that keeping Sami reindeer herding alive is vital for security, that local language, local festivals, local dialogues are crucial glue of society. Now, we already knew that our northern frontier was facing threats from Putin's Russia, but there was more to come. Trump's USA wanted to take over both Canada and Kalaallit Nunaat. Denmark doesn't seem to know what to answer. The Prime Minister of Norway has called Trump's statement special, whatever that is supposed to mean. And Norwegian politician Ola Borten Moe from the joint ruling party Senterpartiet said it's a really, really bad idea to let Greenland decide its own future. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau seems to be the only one understanding the level of discussion here, replying, there isn't a snowball's chance in hell to join Canada and the US. President Trump repeated his claim and desire for Kalaallit Nunaat last Saturday, and Financial Times quotes anonymous European officials saying, before, it was kind of hard to take it seriously, but it is serious, and the Danes are utterly freaked out. Vivian Mossfeldt, the Greenlandic Minister of Foreign Affairs, has cancelled her visit to this conference. And even though the freaked-out European politicians might be right in hoping that this is all just some kind of regular Donald Trump rant, we have already for a long time been under cultural siege. The American tech oligarchs are feeding us culture in all channels, and they are apparently ready to crank up the volume. From now on, everything will be more fake, more anti-democratic, more nationalistic, and more controlled by their ideological Führer, Donald Trump. Winter is not coming, it's already here. And there is clearly a need to be prepared. And this is the reason why Norting already in 2020 launched a cultural preparedness campaign for the North, a 4 by 3 meter neon sign situated in Longyear at Svalbard. This is an I Love the North campaign. The North is not for sale campaign, and Make the North Great campaign. Now, you might think this is an example of media-friendly, provocative art. It is not. It is cultural preparedness. Later, we moved the campaign to Nuuk in Kalaallit Nunaat, Tórshavn in the Faroe Islands, and finally to Vardø, the easternmost settlement in Norway. At least the seagulls enjoy it. To be able to build sustainable culture, you need to be able to live. Artists need incomes, but everybody can't be artists. Also, the rest of the northern communities need something to live off. And the world's richest fish stocks is the reason why people came to this area in the first place. And governments have always been eager to use local people to claim territory. In Vardø, the Danish-Norwegian king built a church already in 1306, using the presence of fishers to mark territory against Russia and claim the land of the Sami people for the crown. Canada wasn't lucky enough to have that much people in its high Arctic, but was well aware that you need human culture on the ground to secure territory. And in the 1950s, the Canadian government was worried that other states might question its claim to the Arctic and tried out forced migration. A handful of Inuit families were moved from their communities at 58 degrees north, that's about the same level as Oslo, and left at 76 degrees north, about the same level as Longyear in Svalbard. The price was high for the people on the ground. 60 years later, the government had to apologize and pay millions. But the communities still exist, and Canada got its human flagpoles. In Norway, all this should be a lot easier. You have people who want to live in Vardø. All you need to do is let them fish. But for some reason, the Norwegian government doesn't seem to be interested in that. So less and less of the money generated by the fish of the north ends up in the pockets of the people living in the north. The right to fish, the quotas, are transferred out of the region, bought by businessmen in the south. And last year, there was a new round of government decisions on quotas, and again, the local fishers of Vardø asked for enough to keep the community alive, maybe even enough for the community to grow after years of decline. Again, the politicians turned them down. So today, the citizens of Vardø remained underpaid human flagpoles for NATO in a community threatened by extinction. They're living with the enemy from outside. Russian bomber planes are regularly practicing to wipe out the whole community. And at the same time, they're fighting the capital within to maintain fishing quotas large enough to keep the community alive. But still, Vardø is a culturally vibrant and very outspoken place. The fisher Vegard Bangsund put it like this in an interview with his local newspaper a few years ago. Nå får det for satan i helvete være nok, stjele for milliarder og tilbyr oss dritt tilbake, kjøss med mett i ræva, vi skal ha fisken vår tilbake, arme hestkuka. Now these are very specific Norwegian terms, even North Norwegian terms, kind of hard to translate, but it goes something like this. You cocksucking, ball-licking bastards, enough is enough, stealing all resources and leaving us with nothing. Kiss my dirty asshole. Give back all our fish, you poor fucking donkey dicks. Now, you might think this is a stupid rant from a man who doesn't understand politics. It is not. It is cultural preparedness. Now, if this was an assembly meeting, this is where we would have the votes. But this is not an assembly. It's a talk on cultural as preparedness. But there is one question that might be good to have your opinion on, because it's a question of art and responsibility. So if we can have out some voting cards, can we do that? Excellent. Right, so as you have understood, Norting has been serving quite a bit of vodka. That is not welcomed by everyone. and occasionally also illegal. Latest in Harstad in June, the police opened a case against us again after serving vodka from our mobile vodka wagon. It didn't help that the Norwegian Minister of Culture over there happily drank with us. So the question remains, is this a good strategy? The policeman in Oslo by that statue, he asked me, he said, so you did not get a permission from anyone to install this sign, did you? And I said, no. There would just have been, loads of bureaucracy, debate about wording. It would have taken forever. And the policeman replied, well, that's how the system is supposed to work, isn't it? And he's, of course, right. You cannot trust artists to make their own decision just because they're artists. How would the world end up then? So the proposal is that I would like you to vote on is very simple. It goes like this. Also, artists and Norting must follow the law, which includes not serving vodka when not allowed and not installing signs on statues when not allowed. Norting must stay law-obeying from now on. Those who support that motion, would you please show your voting cards? And those of you who oppose the motion, please show your... There's one there but down in the corner, by the way. We should acknowledge that. Those who oppose the motion, please show your voting cards now. The motion has fallen. Your decision is noted. Thank you for the trust. It's interesting, isn't it? It is. Okay, now at last to what we're really here to do for you, as the program promises, a piece of art. So I want to welcome to the stage Anne-Berit Buvik and Fredrike Bischoff. We'll end with a song voicing very local concerns. Yeah, a song voicing local concerns. We usually sing it together to unite, to build community, and today it will be performed for us. So this is the Bangsun song. We are gathered here to prepare. We are gathered here to change the way we think. We are gathered here to remind us all that the North is not for sale, no matter who is trying to buy. You might think this is illegal serving of alcohol. It is not. It is cultural preparedness. We are prepared, always prepared.
audience. Before we move on to introducing the panel of today's talk and session, I just have to say thank you to Amund Sjøle Sveen and Norting for this very timely reminder and example of culture as emergency preparedness. Before we go on with the panel, we have another keynote speaker for you today. It is a dramaturg, a playwright, an author from this city. Tale Næss, the stage is yours.
Skål! So, everybody here in Tromsø today, in this beautiful sunset, it's actually now going down for us, I want to tell you a little about the way I see it. And the way I see it is that art functions as a container for knowledge, history and identity, as Amund so clearly has pointed out to us. It functions even as a container for self-awareness. And it can contain and reproduce a status quo, but it can, as we have seen it, also explore it, expand it, and shape our ideas about who we are and what society can be. As such, art functions as a kind of laboratory, alternative modes of being in the world, both as existential and social exploration. As the French philosopher Paul Ricoeur once said, art is to humanity what the model is to mathematics. And this is a bigger picture, a bit bigger example, a bigger way of framing it, and one can see that art is to humanity what the model is to mathematics. Through it, one can explore alternative narratives and dive into ethical and moral and even political dilemmas. And in times of crisis, such as war and civil unrest, we know that there's a tendency to withdraw, to settle for what is known, the familiar or the old way of doing things. And in a polarized society where war is a fact, both in the discourse that goes on around us and on the world stage, even acting out in deep inside the innards of our economy, it is easy to cry for simple solutions. And artistic expression offers us tools for ways of escaping this mode of thinking. In the arts, one is free to challenge those solutions and resist them. As such, art, free, and at the same time financed, for instance, by a state, adds to and takes part in a nation's emergency preparedness. And since even in dark times, art always stands on the shoulders of other artists, printers, writers, theatre makers and composers that thought, painted, wrote and made theatre in other dark times, we can find knowledge and even hope there. We find it in the works of others who speculated, experimented, thought out, and even found other words and other worlds. A world free of slavery, a world where women could vote, a world where farmers could own their land, where battles were prevented and love played out in the ways transgressing racial divides, religious differences, class and gender. Here, Romeo and Juliet kissed and met. Here, Don Quixote fought his windmills. Here, music was made in the concentration camps and in the ghettos. Here, Van Gogh placed his crowds in the cornfield and Pablo Picasso painted his Guernica. Under siege, the poets dreamed of angels. And in the late 1800s, Bjørnstjerne og Bjørnson drew up the foundations of that which was to become a democratic and secular new Norwegian state. And what would it mean to be a nation? A nation with its own institutions, regional and national? What infrastructure was needed? What energy supply? It meant building dams and bridges, theaters and universities. It meant building schools and sports halls, industries, parks and museums. It meant supporting the farmers and protecting our forests and rivers. It meant writing laws and creating policies that made it possible for a small language group to have its own literature, its own publishers, bookstores and libraries. It meant nationalizing our oil and building up a national broadcast system. It meant distributing wealth and sponsoring tickets for cinemas and concert halls, giving out grants and spreading incentives so that culture could be for everyone. And it meant building up our own armed forces, not a professional army of hired guns, but an army constituted by conscripts made up by our own citizens to defend all of this. Today, this is what makes Norway, Norway. And the role that the artist plays in this ecosystem, this feedback loop that constitutes and holds up this nation, might have become so built into the very fabric of our existence, so ingrained in our education, our everyday life, that we can no longer see it, to even make us think that we could do without it, and that we do not need to defend it. And many still, even in Norway, think that good art is there to solidify and settle our ideals, our language, our moral codes and ways of life. That we need to get rid of what isn't good. But maybe art's biggest superpower is resilience. Lies in its resistance against what is given. That it challenges the status quo, like we see inside the Sami art field today. An art field that grows, expresses itself, evolves and develops in relation to, and through an ongoing discussion of what it really means to live inside a Norwegian reality, politically, economically, and culturally. Here, self-awareness, friction, and criticism are often built into the artworks themselves. Artworks that exposes and brings to the forefront the relation between the powerful and the powerless. These works remind us that the fact of the categories we use, like good, necessary, productive, viable, etc., are not always given. It opens our eyes to things we would be blind to, and it gives voice to the voiceless. It reminds us that society is not something stable, but something continuously evolving, even in times of emergency. It irritates us, it entertains us, it's beautiful and it's terrible, and it keeps us on our toes and prepares us for what's to come. All this brings me back to some words by a wonderful writer who speculated about the future in the widest sense, Ursula Le Guin, and she once said, "We live in capitalist times. Its power seems inescapable, but so did the divine rights of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings, and resistance and change often begins in art, often in my art or our art, the art of words." So that's what I'm going to bring you today. I have armed myself with poetry, written an early morning, on a day not as dissimilar to this, just before the sun turned, here in Tromsø. And it goes like this. You are born and lifted, held and helped. You are cared for and cradled, supported and led, read to and sung to as you point to a house, to boats and to bats, to a litter of kittens as they become cats. You sit by a table with a pencil in hand, eagerly trying to write it all down, the boats and the bridges, the buses you ride. For somehow you know this is the task, to answer all of those questions they ask. Like, what is that? And who will you be as you try to conquer a minuscule bit of history? There are words to spell and words to pronounce. Here is an A and there's an E, and that's which comes after a K and a B. And there's Y and there's how, as you dance, as you draw, as you walk, as you run to that place where you need to be, deep inside humanity. This is your house. This is your street, your school, your language, your family, your religion, your faith, your politics. This is how to behave and how to be. That's how they serve you, your identity. But the streets are too narrow, and this room is too small, and you struggle to learn to grasp it all, and the rules cannot harbor all you've been told as you fight, as you love, as you read, as you spell, as you attach the S to the O to the C, and that which comes after I and the T in the word constituting society. And then there is that morning when you try to be free. That's where you find it, formless, unfinished, helpless and coy, a flicker of pain, the ache that is joy, the awkward fragments of your first poetry. How many questions, how many answers? You are lost, you are found, and you are lost once more. There are words like power and powerless, like selection, extinctions, or like suicide, matricide, homicide, genocide. As the streets light up with numbers and fates, with columns and equations of details and dates that only resembles love, resembles hate. And you scan for the pages, for gains and loss in this battlefield, this homecoming, this exodus, where childhood must yield to the complex ecology, spelled ideology. You take the word in your mouth, and you know what it means. You whisper it, you silence it. It populates your dreams. It's there when you wake. It hides in your sleep. It rests in the faces of the people you meet. Yeah, let it do it. It's really nice. As cities tumbles and economies shakes, as the forest fire rages and economies break, as the crowds descend on the parliament. And you are as broke as a homeless, left alone in the dark, cold, void of meaning in a derelict yard. You are like a brother that has no brother, a man without an identity card. You sleep in the innards of a derelict hull, your brain blunt and dull. You have lost your job, lost your future, your money. Your mouth feels funny. It can no longer hold the R and the E, the A and the Y, the lingering E, as you stutter and shake. And you think you might break as you raise your fist against the simplification of language, the muteness of silence, to all that which aches. And in that silence, in that empty place, the child has gone as you hold on to the fragment of a song lingering like a flicker, weak but alive, the beginning of something long gone. And from the steel walls of the shipyard and that scrap of a broken hull, there from the inside of your bone-white skull, among the rubbish and the litter in the night made of lead, you find poetry, unfinished, unread. And you retrieve the letters, the R and the E, and the A and the L, and the I and the T, and draw in the dust reality. And down by the sea, the ocean curves, rolling, swaying, licking the bay, binding the harbor to the city, its parks and its shacks, its roads and its freeways, its trams and its tracks. Tying it all together, unfinished, like you, incomplete as you lay, stretched out at the edge of the bay, lost deep inside, those pockets of history, you start to restore your dignity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tale. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this critical and timely discussion on the intersection between security, resilience, and culture in the Arctic. My name is Maria Utsi, and I'm the head of the Arctic Art Summit International Secretariat, and I'm utterly honored to serve as the moderator for today's panel. And let me just start off by saying a big thank you to the organizers that actually centers the voices of the artists when we are discussing this topic, and giving them the opportunity to actually create a framework for these discussions. We too often discuss these topics without the artists present. As we gather here, good people, we do so against the backdrop of our rapidly shifting global security landscape. Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine and a new term with President Trump in the US has demonstrated the existential threats posed not only to our territorial integrity, but also to our democratic values. In response, nations, particularly in the Arctic, have taken steps to bolster defense and emergency preparedness. As we know, the Arctic is home to vibrant and resilient communities that face unique challenges, from geopolitical tensions and hybrid threats to economic pressures and, of course, the effects of the climate change. But it's also a region that is rich in culture, creativity, traditions, and know-how that holds immense potential as tools for fostering dialogue, trust, and unity. And today we will explore how art, culture, and civil society can not only survive but thrive as part of a more holistic approach to security and resilience. To help us navigate these pressing issues, we have an incredible panel of experts joining us today, representing diverse perspectives from the military to government and the cultural sector. So please join me in welcoming the panel soon to be introduced. Please come to the stage. And thanks for the vodka noting. Please, if you take that chair, Senator, there's a microphone for you. And maybe if you, Tiana, move over beside Saya. And then I think we had a handheld microphone, another handheld microphone. There it is. That's for you. Thank you. Yes. Okay, good to have you here. Welcome. First, I wanted to introduce Senator Pat Duncan, Senator from Yukon, and a member of the Senate of Canada, and a member of the National Security and Intelligence Committee, or parliamentarians. Welcome to you. Here we have Nils Ole Fosshaug, the member of the Norwegian Parliament and of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. But not least, he's a dancer. He's an associated member of the renowned dance company Kartellet. I've seen him in several performances. I will never forget. Then we have Regina Alexandrova, Lieutenant Colonel. That is a cool title. In the G9 Civil Military Corporation, representing the Norwegian Army staff. Welcome to you. And then we have Tiana Lemon, Yukon Government Economic Development Board member, and actively involved in youth-driven climate and policy work in Canada. Good to have you here. And then, last but not least, Saye Solbakk, journalist, activist, and most importantly, festival director of Riddu Riddu Festival, which is the largest indigenous arts and culture festival in the Arctic. So welcome to you all. And together we'll delve into the challenges, the opportunities, and maybe also the risks at this vital intersection, as I said, between culture, security, and resilience in the Arctic. And before we go there, I'll actually also want to just acknowledge a small thing that we also never do in these conferences, and that's the fact that for most of this panel, English is not even their second language, it's the third. So we are all struggling a little bit, so we have to be patient and good to each other, and you have to do the same with us. My good panel, I just wanted to start off with this. When we talk about security and resilience, it's easy to narrow our focus to tangible strategies like military strength, infrastructure, and, well, emergency preparedness in different shapes and forms. And these are undeniably critical, especially in today's security landscape. But in narrowing our focus, we often overlook something just as fundamental: the role of arts and culture in sustaining and strengthening us as humans. Arts and culture are not simply luxuries or afterthoughts. They shape our identities and strengthen our ability to understand and accept different realities, different opinions. And they bring us together. So important, especially during times of uncertainty. They offer a platform for dialogue, reflection, and healing, and they allow us to imagine solutions to challenges that often feel overwhelming. At their core, I dare to say, at their core, they are a source of resilience, both for individuals and for the societies they reflect, as we just saw examples of on this very stage. So I want to start off by hearing from our panelists on their perspectives and experiences with the transformative power of arts and culture. So, from your perspective, what role do arts and culture play in your Arctic communities today? And how do they contribute to the social fabric of our wonderful region? Saye, do you want to start off?
I can start off the ball. First of all, thank you, Maria, for the introductions and Norting. Always great to see you. I hope it's not vodka in this one, though. Who knows? So for me, of course, I run Riddu Riddu Festival, as Maria mentioned, which is an indigenous peoples festival in the village of Olmaivaagi, 2 hours from here. And it started off as a revitalization. So I find Riddu Riddu is already a story about resilience. So I can bring that up as an example. It was started in the 90s, and it was a youth group that sat down together and questioned, why do our parents and grandparents speak Sami and we don't? Are we Sami? What is up? And with that, they understood quickly that we were Sami. And with that, wanted to revitalize our culture. And therefore, first started a small gathering in the village of Olmaivaagi. 600 people do live there. Now, over 30 years later, it has grown to one of the largest indigenous peoples festivals in the world. But most importantly, we now have a vibrant, living coastal Sami culture, not only in the village of Olmaivaagi, but in the entire municipality, which also has had an incredible domino effect on the entire region. So we now and I like to bring up as an example, when you see at the confirmation pictures from church, now, these last years, and you just compare them to 5 years ago, there are 9 out of 10 of them stand in their gakti, their Sami regalia. whereas 5 years ago you would see them in the Norwegian bunad. And it's not that the Norwegians are gone, it's that there has happened a Sami revitalization. And that art can do. And art can make you proud again, and art can make you understand your own background in a way that politics not always does, in the same efficient way, at least.
It's a wonderful and a super important example. Thank you, Saya. Tiana, what about you and Dawson City? How do you see the role of arts and culture in your community?
Thank you for the introduction. So Dawson is a very special place, but I want to share some history on Dawson. So in 1851, the European explorer... Pardon? Oh. European explorer and trader Robert Campbell traveled through the Han territory, followed by the construction of Fort Resilience in 1874, the first trading post on Trøndelag traditional territory. This was the beginning of significant change and displacement for the Trøndelag people. The discovery of gold in 1886 by the European explorers brought an influx of newcomers to our land. Shortly after that, in 1896, even more gold was found, triggering the largest gold rush stampede in history. Some 30,000 newcomers arrived to our traditional territory, fundamentally changing the balance of our land. Miners and other settlers displaced the Trøndelag peoples from our fishing camps at Trocheck, with Chief Isaac leading our move to Moosehide. Chief Isaac sent our songs and stories upriver to Tanna Crossing, Alaska, where they kept our culture safe and preserved it so we wouldn't lose our culture. In the 1960s and 1970s, First Nations people gained the right to vote in the federal and territorial elections. Respectively, in 1973, we, the Trøndelag peoples, along with other Yukon First Nations, presented a comprehensive land claim to the Canadian government. The Yukon Land Claim Agreement was signed in 1993, leading to the final agreement in 1998. Today we exercise self-government, having signed a self-government agreement which grants us the ability to form governing bodies and make laws and regulations for our people and for our lands. To me, culture is so important, and without my ancestors, we wouldn't have the same Dawson we have today. Dawson is such a vibrant place where culture and the arts is abundant. You go up there, you feel accepted for exactly who you are. You know, we've gone through tough times, but we're still here. I think Dawson and the Trøndelag people can give everyone a little bit of hope in that no matter what happens, you still have your culture, you have your people, and those are the people who believe and invest in you. And through art, storytelling, it's a way that we get to showcase our culture in a very authentic way. We have Moosehide Gathering every 2 years on our traditional territory, where everyone is welcome to come, and we showcase our songs, culture, traditional foods with everyone. We think it's important to share and also respect the history of our land.
Thank you, Tiana. And I wanted to move straight on to Senator Duncan also with your North Canadian perspective. I guess what Tiana is saying you can recognize from the communities that you know in Yukon work with. But share with us a little bit about how arts and culture is kind of a driving force also in the northern communities of Canada. I think it's on. It's on? Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, and thank you, Tiana, for that. I apologize for interrupting you at the start. One of the ways that is really important to Yukon people when we begin events such as this is to acknowledge and thank the guardians of the land who have been here for millennia. And in this respect, I believe we would offer our thanks to the Sami people and appreciate their warm welcome to their territory. Tiana gave a great introduction about the land claim self-government agreements and how important they are to the Yukon. Yukon has, and we're not speaking for Canada as a whole, but speaking about the Yukon in particular. And we are a Yukon that leads in terms of our reconciliation and work with First Nations people. There are 14 First Nations in the Yukon. 11 of them have reached land claim agreements. And when we were discussing this panel, one thing that I noted was that once those self-government agreements were reached, that included financial compensation as part of an overall picture. Several of the First Nations one of the first things they've done is constructed cultural centers in their communities. And these cultural centers are more than infrastructure. They are places to gather. They are places to share stories. And they preserve language and preserve culture and offer the opportunity for the community to gather and share traditional foods, as is done at Moosehide, but also in the Cultural Center in Dawson City. And there's one in downtown Whitehorse, Carcross Tagish First Nation, Haines Junction are a unique partnership in the Champagne-Ajiac partner with Parks Canada. One of the Kluane National Park is one of the jewels in Canada's National Park program and is the home to Canada's highest mountain. And their cultural center is combined with the visitor reception center and the interpretation of the parks. So it really blends and enhances the culture and allows everyone to embrace the various culture and First Nations within the Yukon as a whole, our visitors and Yukoners alike.
And can I just ask you also, Senator, what has this federal government of Canada been doing to kind of ensure that there are thriving possibilities to develop these cultural centers and to support the kind of development of arts and culture in the northern communities?
The federal government has a role to play, and their Cultural and Heritage Department does play a role, but it's really the territorial government that has taken the lead for many, many years on this with an Arts and Recreation Act, pieces of legislation, and funding the Arts Center, and which encourages people to come to performances, and the support through various funding programs is not only for the lotteries, for example, is not only sports organizations, it's also arts and cultural endeavors, dance studios, as well as dancers and musicians who travel out of the territories. There's a very strong, vibrant community throughout the Yukon of arts and culture, and government has fostered that. The territorial government, as with some assistance from the federal government as well.
And I would say not only in the Yukon, but it's such a thriving kind of cultural life in all of the northern Canada. And I've been visiting several times, and I find it to be so integrated in all the kind of the communal societal practices in a way that is recognizable from a Sami perspective, but it's also fantastic to see. And would you agree to that? That it's such a kind of internalized part of your communities and how you live?
Absolutely, it is. And a very good example of that includes the Sami people, is the Arctic Winter Games, which is not only a sporting event where young people have the opportunity to outline their very best, but it's a kaleidoscope in that it's a cultural event. and it is throughout the north. We have participation by the Alaskans, Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut, the 3 Canadian territories, the Sami people, and Nuuk Greenland as well, or Greenland. Nuuk hosted the games, that's why I mentioned them.
Wonderful. Thank you, Senator Duncan. Moving on to our parliamentarian and dancer. From your perspective and in your kind of communities, how do you see the role of arts and culture here in Troms?
Thank you for the question. I have to be personal now because I grew up in the middle of nowhere in the inner part of Troms, municipality of Målselv, and I had a marvelous youth and childhood. My family, my closest neighbor were 2 kilometers away, but I grew up with folk music and dance almost every weekend. The grown-ups gathered around, had their fiddles and guitars and their accordions with them, and from I was 2 years old, I stood in the door and watching them having fun, the grown-ups, and you became part of that culture, and with dance, jokes, music, almost all time. And grew up with hunting and fishing, and that was a very safe community because there were always some grown-ups there. We had this, what we call ungdomshus.
A community house.
Community house, yeah. Very important in the most communities all over North Norway, where there was a party, Easter, Christmas, and sometimes between that. And you were allowed to go on those parties after you were 14 years old. And you were allowed to drink because you were grown up then. But there were always the grown-ups there. So when I was 14 and I almost had no feet to walk on after drinking vodka and moonshine, homemade, there was a grown-up who just said, "Nils, this glass is for you. You'll drink water the next 2 hours now till you come back and be clear in your head." And the main thing about that culture, who's been all around northern Norway, is there was the meeting of people. From 14 to 95 or over 100, and you were safe, you were gathered together, and that strong community has made me strong. I know exactly where I'm come from, a small maybe say village was called Fosshaug. Then you come from the municipality of Målselv. You come from the county of Troms. I come from the northern Norway. I come from Norway, and I'm feel confident who I am and who brought me there. And it was my neighbor, my family, and good friends among in the area. And it was a typical farmers' municipality until 1950. Then the Brigade of North,
military, the army,
established, and there was a change. You got a city center. You got more people coming in from different parts. Some of them settled, and it was a big change in the municipality. But sports, cultural activities always been very, very important. And the main thing is people meeting each other, dancing with each other, hugging each other, discussing with each other.
This is so interesting because you come from a district, as you say, where the army is very present today. So I'm looking forward to hearing more on your perspectives on culture being so important to you personally, and culture as preparedness in also security and security context. And we have to move on to the army. Because I find this so interesting. The fact that you have now heard, like the rest of the panel, you don't have to answer for like the whole Norwegian army. That's all right. But we have heard these kind of statements and kind of testimonies on how important culture is, how crucial, how integrated internalized it is in our life practices. And yet, when the big report came from the army on preparedness, national preparedness, culture wasn't mentioned by a word. And it changed. We have some changes, you might want to mention them, but when it first came, it was like nothing, as if culture was not a part of our resilience. And I have to ask you...
I know you have a difficult question.
I do have a difficult question. This was just the introduction to my difficult question. So I will jump to the difficult question. You can start off there, right? Because resilience, as I said, is often discussed as a combination of both military and civilian strength. And when we spoke before this panel, you mentioned that culture is not currently a topic in military discussions about fostering resilience in the Arctic, and I find that so interesting. And given the role that culture plays in fostering trust and cohesion and identity and unity within communities, do you think there is an opportunity or even a need for the military to integrate cultural considerations into its approach to resilience? And how could you do that on practical terms?
Okay.
Big question.
A very big question.
Yeah.
And before I answer, I will say thank you to the North thing. That was so refreshing. I vote for you. And I will also say a word to the head speaker about what you said about resilience as a superpower. That, I think, is the sense of what we discussed today. And I will bring this back to discussions in the Army. And it's right, as you mentioned, this is not a topic we discuss in the Army. Culture, literature, theater. We build our culture inside our unity to strengthen the different groups in the Army. For us, the Army, war is our focus. We build and educate soldiers in peacetime so they can be resilient, they can be powerful, and that they can handle war situations. That's our main goal. But in the total defense system and for our people in the Army, we will not be able to handle wartime if we don't have resilience in the population. All the total defense system depends on resilience in the people. I don't have the answer how we can find areas, find things to combine military and the civilian situation and what we can do, but I know that culture is of huge importance for the military. And as it has been said here, to build resilience in the population, to get people together, to strengthen the community, to strengthen the people in the municipality. That's of vital importance for us. And also our soldiers in wartime, when they have opportunity, they also need to get cultural impulses, to relax, to get their head off something else, to see that it's a different world, to find their holistic inside. So that's also very important for us. And I also want to mention that Hitler, during the World War II, said to Terboven in Norway, give me the Norwegian people's hearts and minds. You have to win the Norwegian people. And one of the first things they did was in 1940. They had a whole week of cultural activities in Oslo. They got singers, they got musicians from Germany, and they used culture to try to reach the Norwegian people. And they used a lot of money for cultural activities in Norway. So culture, it's on so many different levels. And I'm so happy that you bring up this topic today, because after you called me, I've been thinking so much, because this is an issue we don't think so much and don't discuss. So it will be interesting to see the next year what will happen if we are coming further ahead on this topic to integrate military, cultural life locally. Thank you.
Nils Ole.
Just one thing. You said that when this government started, they set down the Commission of Defense and the Commission of Total Preparedness, 2 commissions. And on the Commission of Total Preparedness, they didn't mention culture by one word, not a single word. So when the government started to work with the Commission's results, and then they had this made the stortingsmelding white paper,
kind of a
white paper
of
total defense. Culture was in that white paper,
included.
Including, and I think it was many politicians in the parliament who actually reacted when there was not mentioned in the commissions for total defense. It was a disgrace, actually. But I think they saw their purpose not wide enough, and that's why. But because after that, politicians in the parliament are discussing the meaning of culture.
So the discourse has changed, I think. Because,
it has changed.
Because the first white paper was like super, as I said, it was super tangible. It was like, Virginia.
When you mentioned the white paper, I just have to tell you, when I read the white paper, I didn't notice the cultural part at all. Not before I talked to you and I read through it again. Oh my God, it's a chapter of culture and free press. So I think that explains a bit how we think. I didn't see that chapter. So I think we have a way to go to integrate culture in the everyday life, because it starts in the everyday life.
And you think is there possibilities for change within the army concerning this more kind of holistic approach to resilience, especially, I would say?
I will say we will use culture inside our unity to build strength and resilience in the army. But I think it's important for the civilian society to build resilience in the communities, in the municipalities, because we are relying on that when it comes to wartime, and the total defense system relies on it. So I can't just now say if we have some...
we will follow up. Don't you worry. And Senator Duncan, from a Canadian perspective, do you recognize these discussions? In what way would you say culture is included in the Canadian total defense plans?
It's a bit of a tough question to answer. Again, we're a very, very large country, very young country, and we frequently, in the situation of emergency preparedness, for example, the Canadian Army is frequently our first call, and they are the first on the scene. So in that respect, like fires, floods, the Canadian Army and the Department of National Defense are there to support communities in times of crisis. So I would say that's key where it's incorporated.
There might be a potential also in Canada for a more holistic approach to resilience?
Well, it's interesting, though, that you mentioned resilience, because one of the things, of course, that all of the Arctic is at the forefront of is climate change. And that's particularly evident in the north, and with many species, but one species that I'd like to mention in particular is the salmon. And that the loss of salmon is very much affecting a number of First Nations. And those First Nations, some of them, have come together, Carcross Tagish in the south, Tonquatchin Council in Whitehorse area, Kwanlin Dun. And what they've done is they've released Connecting the Broken Salmon Trail, Our Relationship with Southern Lake Salmon. They did this last year. And the plan aims to restore and prioritize the critical role of salmon in culture, language, landscape, and laws of those 3 self-governing First Nations. So to me, that speaks to the resilience of communities when faced with such challenges, perhaps not to security so much as food security and security of a species, but not in a national defense perspective, but in the protection of persons, protections of people.
Absolutely. Thank you. And speaking of which, I want to move on to Saya and Tiana, because we're talking about the indigenous nations in the Arctic, and the Arctic is mostly indigenous land. And our communities have a reservoir of wisdom, of traditions, and know-how that has enabled us to thrive and adapt to challenging environments for as long as we can remember. And I would love for you to reflect on how these indigenous practices and kind of knowledge systems, could they be integrated into kind of resilient strategies to strengthen Arctic communities today? Saya?
I have to say that, like, national strategies on preparedness is not my expertise. And this is my second panel speaking about these things this month. But I have to say, for me as a Sami woman, every day when I wake up and everything I do is to defend our land, and it's to defend our culture. Everything I do, it doesn't feel like I'm preparing for something. It's to defend what we have and have defended for thousands of years. And that is common for indigenous people. That is a common indigenous language. After the Napoleon Wars, when someone decided to have fun and paint some borders, we adjusted. When there's some crazy men in the south that suddenly want to buy Greenland, we adjust and we keep being resilient, and we will be forever. I would like to reflect on arts in that field, but first I want to mention an episode, like, talking about this. I find it's difficult to not mention what's happening with Greenland right now and Trump, but I saw a YouTube video of MAGA supporter, Trump supporter Nick Shirley, who went and asked the people in Kallalit Nunaat what they think about maybe becoming a part of America. And there, Yusuf Tarak, who's a friend of mine and also an activist and rapper in Kallalit Nunaat, said that, because he asked, Nick Shirley asked, so you were bought by Denmark. Why is it worse to be bought by the States? And he said, we're not bought by Denmark. We're colonized. And it was news for this Trump supporter, Nick Shirley, that, we were not, this land was not sold. So this is a story he has heard about the Arctic and the Kallalit Nunaat, that Denmark bought this land sometime. But the stories is what we're telling. The stories is what we're telling through arts. And it's all about who we are letting to define and tell these stories. And I find in indigenous communities, we have always been resilient, but had an excellent way of keeping the the generational knowledge alive. So there's so much knowledge, and I'm kind of like, lucky you, nation states, that we have been resilient and kept this alive. So it's very fun when we speak of these things, because about being prepared, and I have thought about before this panel, what does it mean for me to be prepared? And it's simply, I will not prepare, I am prepared, because I have learned from my foremothers of how to live with the land. And I'm sure that whatever crisis comes, we will again adjust and be resilient.
Thank you, Saya. I have to ask the same questions for you, Tiana. If you can do you recognize these reflections from Saya and from the Sami communities and the Sami perspective, their readiness in a way, being born prepared, and being able to adjust to changes? What kind of practices do you find in your own culture, traditions, and community that is important, in every way, but when we're talking especially about preparedness?
Yeah, big question, but I feel like as a Trondheim person, we do a really good job of passing down knowledge to the youth. So I am the chair of the housing committee, and we have youth on our board, on the committee. We have, the middle-aged on our committee, and then we also have elders on our committee. And it's a really interesting position being the chair, and trying to keep these meetings running, efficiently when an elder speaks, because, we respect that elders have a lot of lived-in knowledge that we don't have. We have to listen to them. So understanding the importance of their lived-in knowledge is extremely important, and they're also there to pass down their knowledge to us. Senator Pat Duncan brought up the salmon crisis in the Yukon, and our Trondheim government still runs a fish camp. We bring in salmon from Alaska, and the elders are there, the middle-aged people are there. Everyone in the everyone in the community plays a role. So, the middle-aged people are there because someone needs to plan the event, coordinate it. The youth are there to participate, learn. Maybe they're not participating, but they're there, and that's important. And then the elders are there to pass down the knowledge of how to, prepare the salmon and set up our smokers and pass down that traditional knowledge to the youth. And we can't leave anyone out. And cultural preparedness happens from such a young age. So in Dawson, we have Head Start, which is a pre-kindergarten program, which lots of people are immersed in their culture way before pre-kindergarten, but in pre-kindergarten, they're learning their language, Han. They're learning how to prepare meats, traditional foods. They're going out on the land, learning, respecting where they came from. And I just think when we talk about preparedness, we need to also involve the youth, because we're the up-and-coming generation, and we are the protectors and keepers of our lands. And if we don't have that respect and connection with our elders and the middle-aged group, how are we going to learn and understand our culture in a way where it's current? And, the times are changing. And it's important to look to the youth because, if we only look at the elders, they have this mindset of they want everything to be like how it was in the past, which is extremely important. We're holding on to our culture and what has protected us for so many years. But the youth have a mindset of we are advancing, but let's do this in a way where it doesn't cause hurt. And how can we do this in a way where we're not only creating a future for ourselves, but for our children and for our children's children? And blending those two age groups is important. And through Canada's history of a lot of hurt towards First Nations, kind of the generation before me, is still healing. And youth today are wanting to be the change, and we're here, and we have a voice, so...
Thank you. And speaking of youth, because we are now approaching landing in this panel, I kind of wanted to ask all of you, taking into consideration the things that we have been discussing these 50 minutes or so, and also with the backdrop that we started with a kind of very critical situation in the world right now, if you knew that things would be like it is now, 15 years ago, what do you think we would have done differently to prepare ourselves, to strengthen our resilience, to strengthen our communities? Because I think we would have done something differently, Nils Ole, from a parliamentarian perspective. Like, what should have been done differently?
Well, the Norwegian social model is high trust and strong public sector, and it's important part of the foundation of Norwegian preparedness. We all remember the stories from World War II, where Hitler tried to control the theaters, the cinemas, the school, the church, and that heritage. After World War II, we had started to think the total defense, the whole community as the total defense of Norway. And I think that's been very good for Norway. We were lucky. I just came from Denmark and Netherlands and talked to my colleagues in the parliaments there, and they don't speak about total defense the way we do. The military is over there. This is the civil society. It's your job to defend us. Norway, we have a different thinking of it. And culture is one of the main thinking in the total defense. But we don't often think about it. And that's important. We have our volunteers in different organizations, in sports, in music, in culture, who is the life center in so many communities. And we think that they're just there. It's happening by itself, but it's not. You have to make politics out of it. How you can support the cultural activities, how you can support the free press, and that I think we can be better of it. But we have a fantastic start in Norway. And we have done a lot thing right, but we have to continue work about it. And I think the times we're living in right now, it makes the discussion come up again. And that's very important, and we have to keep a hold on it and discuss it all over, because that's how strong Norway is in the total defense aspect, to have the whole wide picture with us.
And Regina, also, if we knew that the world would look like this in 2025, do you think the kind of approach to the total defense report and commission would have been different? Would you in the army have worked differently?
We have a very good dialogue and communication, and we are a part of the total defense system, and we work very well together, and we have done that for years. So I think that work maybe will be the same, but we have worked in the army to discuss with the municipality to focus on military activities. What should the municipality and what should they do if it's wartime? So I think we would have had more focus on that. We can support them. We can give them the military scenarios in their area, and they have to build resilience and to prepare what they should do in wartime. We are doing that now. We have been doing that for the last couple of years. So I think that's very important because it starts in the municipalities. So, but we are depending on the money also coming into the army so we can build strength.
How much do you need?
I think you know.
Well, we're all there. We're all there. Finalize this panel, Saya. Looking ahead, from a Sami perspective, from a youth perspective, from an Arctic perspective, what do you think we need to emphasize? Where do we need to go to strengthen our communities, arts and culture as the center of holistic thinking in resilience, in community building, and so on?
A lot of perspectives to fill. But I think most importantly, from a Sami perspective, or from my perspective, is we live in a time also in Norway, in the borders, where we as Sami people have to defend ourselves against the government, where we already internally have to defend our culture against government, for example, with the Fosen case. And now you could see the youth, the one sitting here, Ellen Ystad, who won in the court, again, not wanting to pay the fines when they were civilly disobedient towards the government, where it said in the court ruling that they won because they needed to be civil disobedient because to show the government that they had been civilly disobedient for 500 days. They won with that background. So in order to even speak about national defense, I think you have to clean up all the mess with the internal defenses before we speak of how we are going to be prepared internationally. So from a Sami perspective, that is the most important. And having to fight for very fundamental human rights gives less space for us to work for great art spaces, to have a celebration of our cultures, and work on unity. So I think that is the first step ahead.
Thank you so much, and let that be the last word of this panel. And I just want to say thank you to the panelists for this very interesting conversation, and thank you to the organizers, Troms County and Tromsø Municipality and the Arctic Arts Summit. It's fantastic to have you here, and especially thank you to the artists that laid the foundation for this conversation today. So have a great day in Tromsø, good people. Thank you.